Welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how a community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. My name is Yurii. I help people and brands shine through communities and personal connections. And my guest is Ashley Gallman Williams, a strong community professional with over 15 years of experience scaling programs at companies like Wix, Airbnb, ClassDojo, and now Stripe. And she's built global communities that empower people to connect, collaborate, and thrive, from launching ambassador networks to leading international teams across 90 plus countries. And she's proven that when people come together with purpose, extraordinary things happen. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you, Yuri. I'm glad to be.
Super happy to talk to you. We had a little bit of delay here and there, but finally, life is happening, life is going on. So no matter when, no matter how, the main thing that we are here right now, and I will ask you everything about your experience. Well, once again, it's never enough time, but we'll just go with the flow. So let's start with the easiest one. So what's your definition of a community for business?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's the easy question. So for business, I like to think about it as a Venn diagram. So you have the business need, you have the user need, and the community should exist at the intersection of those two things. And not only should the community exist at the intersection of those two things where business need and user need overlaps, it should also be driving something that only the community can provide. So only a many-to-many function can provide, something that is more powerful when you are bringing a group of people together versus sending an email or a push notification. But really the key is at that intersection of business need and user need.
I feel like it's one of the main things that people are missing, especially new business founders who are starting. They hear about this community everywhere. They have no idea what is it. And like, oh, I have a newsletter. Is it a community? No, it's newsletter. It's not a community. So let's make things clear. So, and what's your definition of a community goal?
Yes. So, I mean, really, I like actually to think about goals for community across three different buckets, actually. I think it's important to have all three. So you have growth. So you need to actually establish the community. So those are metrics like how many members are in the community, or how many advocates do you have? How many people are attending your events or participating in a forum, depending what community programs you leverage. And then you have engagement. So thinking about like, what is the actual health of the community? So amazing if you have 1 million community members, but it doesn't matter if it's a sad, dead zombie community. They need to be interacting with each other. They need to be deriving value from each other. And there's a whole suite of metrics you can look at there. And then finally, and I think this is where you're really driving, is impact. So once you have the community established and it's healthy, how are you actually leveraging it to drive impact for the business? And the way you define that goal varies from business to business, or even I like to tell people a lot, it isn't just varying from business to business. Also, sometimes it varies over many years in a business. And so I think the key for setting a community goal, going back to business need and user need, is always thinking about where is that overlap? Where are you meeting and driving value there? And that's going to change depending on what company you're in. And it's also going to change depending on the stage of that company or the needs of the business over time. So that Venn diagram overlap is always changing. And I think that's an important thing for community managers to keep in mind, is that is not a static thing, even when you're at the same company over multiple months and years.
Yeah, it's very hard to find sometimes this intersection, because sometimes business wants different things and people want different. I feel like it's a crazy situation, but it's always possible to find this. And I feel like it's the main job of community builders specifically to really understand and kind of like translate from like human language to business language and vice versa to make this connection happen. And the moment you talked about impact, I remembered it was Tim McDonald, one of the previous guests, who told that ROI, it's really return on impact. And now every time that I talk about it, about community ROI, I have it in my mind. And coming back to the growth part, he told about growth. I just couldn't let myself not to ask this question: quality or quantity?
Both. But you can never have quantity at the expense of quality. It's super critical. I always tell community managers you should never have a growth goal that isn't balanced with that an engagement or health goal, because the growth doesn't matter if you don't have the other. It's just vanity metrics. And so it's important to have both and to balance them. But you need both because in many scenarios, like the scale, especially in business, the scale is critical, but the scale is mean if it actually is make believe.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had one of the clients I was working with, and the main goal was growth without anything else, and it was not even connected to the business. And I was like,
Oh
why we
no.
are not connecting it with the business? Like, why do we need this community to grow if it doesn't intersect anyhow with the business and bringing you no value? No, we just need to grow the community. Okay, but
That's
it
a
was
house of
weird.
cards.
It
Definitely a
didn't
house
it
of
didn't
cards.
go well, but it was weird. So yeah, never worked that way. So coming back to the goal. So what is one goal of the communities that you are working with at the moment or worked before that inspires you personally the most?
Yeah, so I can give the example of what I'm working on now at Stripe, which is quite nascent. And then if you want, I could also give an example from Airbnb or previously. What's interesting with Stripe, excited to take the role at Stripe, and part of why I'm loving my job at Stripe is that I'm really getting to build from the beginning, which is rare to be able to do at such an established company. And I'm also loving that like I'm getting a lot of engagement from Stripe's leadership on like what is the vision for this community? What do we need to be doing? And the vision here is really that the Stripe user base is incredibly diverse. If you can imagine a type of business, they're probably using Stripe, all the way from my dentist here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to a small vertical SaaS company to a large enterprise and everything in between. And because of that, engaging meaningfully with each of those types of businesses at scale is challenging because the products that a nonprofit uses is going to be different from that vertical SaaS company. And then also the challenges they're trying to solve are very different. And so we're leaning into community, especially a community-led motion of identifying Stripe users who are thought leaders in each of those smaller micro communities and empowering them to start to foster a Stripe community around that. And that's allowing us to reach and deeply engage and drive value for businesses at a very specific level at scale in a way that would be harder to do if we needed to hire someone for each of these types of businesses to create content, to drive customer success. So it's been really powerful to think about actually this North Star of driving value for the businesses and thinking about reach, growth, extent of activity. But the reason why that growth, that extent of the community is important is that really ultimately that North Star is driving value and measuring the positive sentiment. Like, do the businesses we engage feel like they're getting value from Stripe? That drives positive brand affinity, that helps them go further in their product adoption journey as well. And then if we're able to do that at scale, that's like even more businesses that we've driven that value for, which is really powerful. And so that's been great problem statement to grapple with. But then you have examples that are like super laser focus specific for the business need, going back to like each business and the time in the business is different. When I joined Airbnb and was leading and building the experience host community, and experiences had just launched, conversely, we were really focused on host success, because Airbnb as a marketplace is really thinking about supply and demand. Our hosts were the supply. And it was important that we optimize that supply, that not only are we bringing on, goes back to, you don't want to grow at the expense of quality. Not only do we want to bring on hosts, but we also wanted those hosts to be offering really high quality experiences, because if they did that, their business would succeed and grow, our business would succeed and grow. And so we were really laser focused at Airbnb, especially in my experiences days, on host success and how are we actually bringing hosts together to learn from each other so that they could be better hosts, offer better experiences, thus get better reviews, thus get more bookings, thus everyone's business grows. So going back to what we were saying before, it's like each role I've had and each company I've worked for has had a very distinct problem statement and a very distinct solution that then has distinct metrics that we're looking at for the business impact.
Like I feel like it's really, really inspiring when you are growing the community in a way and growing your business in a way that you are helping your clients grow their businesses. Because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like positive karma all the way. So you are helping people and their business is growing and your business is growing because of it. I feel like it's like the best, like the best inception way of growing a business.
Absolutely. Well, I think you said something earlier about, oh, sometimes businesses, want you to drive goals that aren't in the interest of the user. But actually, the two are twinned. You just said positive karma. It's like, yes, it's positive karma, but it's also good business because if your users are successful, your company will be more successful. And that's part of the responsibility of the community manager is to help to tell that story and to help to build that narrative and that suite of metrics that like you're not just helping the users. By helping the users, you are helping the business. Because if your users are successful, that's going to lead to revenue. That's going to lead to driving other metrics as well.
So coming back to your current role, am I hearing it correctly that you kind of like identifying the thought leaders of different cohorts and kind of growing community builders out of your clients?
Yes, exactly. And we actually are calling them, the name of the program is Stripe Community Builders, literally. And partially
Okay.
because we ran a pilot. And I said, okay, we're going to build this into a program now to the folks who are in the pilot. And I said, what do you want to be called? And they said, well, we're builders and we build community. So we should literally just be called community builders, which I loved. I was like, perfect.
Very straightforward, like it's clear naming. And what some specific actions do you take to reach this goal of growing this program of Stripe Community Builder?
Yes. So a couple of different things. So I think going back to that, like grow, engage, impact. So for grow, we're really honing in on like what is the most ideal persona for recruitment. So thinking about how do we recruit these builders and grow the number of builders we have. And one of the key principles I always emphasize when it comes to building a community-led program is you should try to identify the people that are already doing this thing or really eager to do it versus going out and trying to convince people to do something they've never done before or have no interest in doing. So it's critical to design your advocate, champion, whatever you want to call it, recruitment process in a way that you're actually finding the people who are already motivated to do this. So that's one. And then on engagement, we're starting to put together V1 resources and tools that make it easy for them to get inspired on how they want to organize their first event, get inspired on how they can optimize their events. And part of that is actually not to get meta, but it's like community on top of community. So part of it is actually connecting the builders with each other so they can learn from and inspire each other. And then finally, with impact, we're also starting to work on, can we put together almost like event kits around key Stripe products and themes and messages so that if they do want to do an event around a specific Stripe product to raise awareness or deepen engagement around that product, we made it really easy and turnkey for them to do that. So those are just a few of the things, but we're like very, very early in the journey in Stripe. And so there's just like so much more to be done there.
So what business goals this program serves?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, we're really thinking about how are we deeply engaging and driving the success and sentiment of a very wide, diverse range of Stripe users across the board. As I mentioned, you've got the nonprofit using Stripe in one way. You've got a vertical SaaS company using Stripe in another way. And we want to be able to engage them and set them up for success on Stripe very specifically to their use case and need. That's really hard to do at scale if Stripe is needing to generate all that content, all that information at that very specific level. And also our users often know better exactly okay, for the nonprofit space, like how are we actually leveraging Stripe for donations effectively? What product suite do we need to do? What are some of the hurdles you came across when setting something up in Stripe? So it's this idea of driving value for the businesses, bringing them together to not just discuss how they're using Stripe, but also to discuss the problems that they're facing and that have led them to Stripe as well.
Okay, so basically it's pretty clear. You told that if your client's businesses grows, it helps to grow your business. So it's like a clear connection between community goal and a business goal. And what drives your community members to be active? What drives them to engage with the community? What drives them to share their experience, to host event? Like what motivates them?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the case of the community builders, A lot of them are leveraging Stripe or offering Stripe services as a part of their business. And so they are really eager to be positioned as thought leaders in Stripe. They really want to grow their network in their specific field or in their specific city. So they're really motivated from, wanting to grow their own business and wanting to partner with Stripe to do it. But also on top of that, and this is really critical, because you can have that, but if you don't also have this just like passion about community and a belief in community, then it's not quite the same. And so it's kind of finding people that have two. I was chatting with a new community builder yesterday who she just joined the program. She's in Mexico City. And you could just see that spark in her eye and the enthusiasm she had when she was talking about how she loves bringing people together, how she loves helping other businesses, how she's done this before. And so I think it's both. It's like they have this more like almost extrinsic motivation of I want to grow my business. I want to, grow my path as well. But they also then have that paired with an intrinsic motivation of just they genuinely love connecting with other people and want to help other businesses. And the two together are really important. And then to your question about the people who are participating in the groups that these community builders are fostering, I think it really goes back to the business goal. And that's where, that Venn diagram overlap again is like our goal as Stripe is to deliver value to these businesses that allows them to succeed, use Stripe and succeed more on Stripe and as a business. And that's also why these businesses show up to these events. They're like, oh, I want to hear about subscription growth. I want to hear about Stripe's agent toolkit. I want to hear about AI monetization. I want to go and hear this great content at an event, but also meet other businesses trying to solve this problem, because it's going to make me more likely to be able to solve this problem effectively and grow my business. So it is this like perfect overlap of like, we want to give value to the businesses, and the businesses are showing up for that value because they need it and want it as well.
You are in this very unique position when you are growing a company or growing a community for an established company. And usually out of many, many cases that I've heard, it was company usually growing together with a community. So it was not like company like, okay, we're now successful and now we will invest in the community. So I'm curious, from this unique position, what are some pros and cons of building a community from scratch for an established company?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the pro is that like you have, to be honest, you just have more resourcing. There's more context. Also, if you're at a very established brand, people are already have energy around your brand. They know, like when you start to promote events, when you start to promote the community, it's like, oh, Stripe, I love it, or Airbnb, yes. Like there's already that connection versus like convincing people like, we're this new startup you haven't heard of, but like this is going to be great. Come join. I think there's already that brand ethos that is definitely a tailwind. But then on the other side, when you're at an established brand, it can be, a little bit more challenging sometimes to innovate and iterate rapidly. There are established systems, there are established ways of doing things. Often there are established ideas about what works, what doesn't work. And so I think that's really important when you're coming into an established brand or trying to make an impact. It's really early on to really understand the restrictions you're working with, so that you can find the fastest paths to continue to innovate and iterate despite a company being established. And so it's not impossible. It just takes like a higher level of strategy before you start doing the work. And I think also too, one of the workarounds you have there is like, look, let me do a pilot. Let me do a little test. Let me get some results. And then we can grow and grow and grow from there. And like, you can kind of have that like proof in the pudding example of like, this isn't just a hypothesis. This is like, here's the results from a small test. I'd like to scale it from here. So it can be a little bit more of a challenge, but it is not impossible. It's definitely still feasible to innovate and iterate. And I've definitely found that at Stripe. It's something I'm loving at Stripe. I've had a lot of support in being experimental and trying new things, being outside of the box. So I think those are the pros and cons you weigh there. Whereas like at a startup, usually it's kind of the Wild West a little bit of like, yeah, use whatever tool. Like you don't need to go through a procurement process and like send as many emails as you want. It's just a little bit more, you can kind of like just have a lot more freedom to do whatever without a lot of overhead. But then that often comes with just like struggles as well with the startup.
I feel like it's also a little bit less responsibility. Because when you are doing a startup, you can get in much less troubles if you are doing something wrong when you're working with an established company.
Yeah, that's true. Although also I think too with startups, the like cost of failure is higher as well. I think that's hard because you don't have, you aren't, one lever in a sea of levers in like a marketing department or whatever. You might be like, one of three key things the company is bet on in a startup. And so there's maybe a higher appetite for mistakes, but failure can come with higher risks at a startup too sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about the number three, what are three teams that you are usually working with the most while building a community, and what's in it for them? So how does a community impact them?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it is varied for going back to like each company is different, the goals are different, and then that also changes over time. So it's definitely varied depending on what company I'm sitting in, what the goal is at the time. But generally, the ones that I have worked with the most are like product and product marketing are often very, very close partners. Community can be such a powerful way to engage users and educate users around a product, especially when the message you're trying to get across about the product or the product itself is complex. Something where like a push notification in their dashboard isn't going to do it. And or when you need social proof, when it's just a lot more effective to hear from other users, hey, I did this thing, I used this thing, and it was impactful, and this is how. And so I've often partnered really closely with product teams and PMM on engaging users very deeply around a product. Also, in extracting user feedback. Community can be such a powerful way to extract feedback around products that then gets distributed across the team. The other ones, kind of going to like education, is usually the education team. I'm usually working arm in arm with the education team as well as any kind of like customer success, customer support team. I think community, education, success are all just different sides of the same coin of thinking about how do we empower our users, how do we help them be more successful, and we're using different tactics and strategies to do it. But when those three teams work together cohesively, it can be really powerful and create a much more 360-degree strategy on how you're empowering your users as well.
Community is a horizontal organization that works with different teams and kind of like being a glue between different teams. So I'm curious, how does it feel from your side? Are you also being a glue within those teams?
I think one of the things that is challenging and rewarding about being in community is you're often at the intersection of everything. You touch every team, and that's powerful in that like you have relationships everywhere, and you can drive impact for the company everywhere. But it's also challenging because having that many stakeholders to manage can become really overwhelming really quickly, and it takes a lot of really sharp project management and thoughtful, proactive communication to make sure that works and is a benefit, and not a con. And so I found that to continue to be true at Stripe. I work across almost every single team at Stripe. And that's been really powerful, especially as somebody who's new. I've only been at Stripe for 9 months. It's been an amazing way for me to just get to know a large part of the company really early on. But like I said, it has required a lot of proactive communication. I spent a lot of time looking at the org chart, really understanding like how do these people connect? How do they ladder up? Whose goal, like what goals are they trying to drive? But that's all, three-dimensional chess that's critical for a community builder who wants to succeed at a brand.
How, when you are talking to all these different people, and sometimes, yes, of course, you are helping them, you are bringing them some data, some feedback, etc. But sometimes you need them to help you. So I'm curious, how do you encourage people from other teams to work with a community team without adding more work on their plates?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. And it's funny, I'm actually working on a presentation about this for Toronto Community Week. So this is helping me prep for my presentation. But I think one is always being proactive. Really successful community managers and strategists are constantly looking at the roadmap, not just a high level across the company, but for all their key stakeholders. You're constantly looking at the roadmap and looking to see, are there opportunities where, oh, this product team is working on this project. community could potentially drive value for them if we do X, Y, and Z. So keeping an eye out proactively for these opportunities as teams create their roadmaps or adjust of, oh, actually, this is one of their priorities. Community could help that priority, and reaching out to them in that context of like, I saw that you're trying to launch this product next year and it needs X, Y, and Z. I actually think if you got on board supporting this community initiative, it could help you meet those goals. So I think you often hear people say, frame the ask in the context of their goal. That's true. But part of that means you need to be really on top of what those goals are. And if you can't stock it in Slack or roadmaps or strategy, it's also having regular syncs to ask, what's your goal right now? How can we meet it? So that's like from the very, very practical side. But from the more like emotional side, the more you can generate enthusiasm and inspiration and excitement around the community, I think it's really important to be a proactive storyteller as well as a community builder. So whether you're sending regular updates or you have a community love Slack channel, it's showing the numbers behind your community, but also showing the photos, the videos, the pull quotes of look at the energy around this that we're generating, look at the positivity we're generating. So you kind of to pair that together of how can you keep an eye on their goals and tell the story that community can help drive it, but then also tell a story that inspires them, that gets them excited about the idea of what it could be like to engage our users. And those two things together are really powerful because you need the practical and the inspirational to really be effective.
What is love language of bringing the wins and the benefits and storytelling around the community? Like, how do you do?
So I do a couple different things. Right now it's Stripe, but I've done several different methods. So I actually do a bi-weekly update that I send via Slack and email. And it has two things. It has just like very simple bullets on like, here's the metrics, here's how we're performing against them, here's some key updates. You should always write updates assuming people are not going to read, that they are going to skim. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see, not just community managers make, but just like humans in business, is writing updates that are just big blocks of text. Nobody is going to read big blocks of text. Do numbers, break it up with bullet points, use creative formatting, make it so that it's very visually compelling and very short and easy to digest. If you have a big block of text, people are just going to glaze over and click to the next thing. And then also punctuating it with photos. So to your point, photos and videos, really key. I try to have some sort of visual element every single time. And then also pull quotes. This is a really big one. So in my recap, I list, here's all the community-led events that happened in the last week. And for each one, I have, here's the stats, here's who attended, here's the CSAT. I have a pull quote from an attendee. So it's like, this is why I loved this event and it delivered this value to me. And then a photo. So you have, once again, you have the numbers and you have the inspiration together. I've also done video updates and I think they're really powerful. The only reason I don't do more is I hate watching myself on video. It's like not my favorite, but they are super effective because there are some people who learn better with video. And I think that is one tip I give a lot is I think sometimes people are afraid to spam, but we need to remember everyone's distracted. And so actually, if you're doing an update or you're sharing a piece of information, doing it across multiple different channels and mediums is really helpful because one person's going to read the Slack, one person's going to read the email, and one person's going to watch the video. And so if you have the capacity to do like a variety of different types of updates, you're more likely to reach a broader audience because just different people have different learning preferences.
Yeah, it's very similar to how I deliver the podcast conversations because when we have a podcast, like it's on the platform, nobody knows about it, but I have to post it on LinkedIn, I have to put it on Substack, sometimes send it via email, like put it everywhere and then share some videos and things. That's exactly how it works. And I also had this feeling that, oh my God, I'm spamming people. And then like they don't even see all these messages. They will be lucky if they will notice one message. So I feel like it's pretty much the same thing is here. Community is not always a bright side. There is also a dark side. So I'm wondering, how do you talk about the challenges that you face in the community internally?
Yeah, so the challenges is in like challenges in managing the community or challenges is in like critical product feedback you're getting from the community or both.
Both. Both. Let's go for both.
Yeah. So I would say like challenges in managing the community. I think it's really important to not just pose the problem, but pose the problem and come with some potential answers and approach it as instead of here, I'm going to complain about this thing, approach it as here is an opportunity where we could improve. I would love your collaboration to fix this. And here's the sort of collaboration that I need. And so I think that's key. If you come to stakeholders or leaders complaining, that's just going to be frustrating for them. It's like, okay, you have a problem. Do you have any suggestions how I should fix this problem? Like, especially if you're a more senior person and you're dealing with senior leadership, they don't have the capacity to solve your problems from a blank slate. But if you come to them and say, hey, I think we really have an opportunity to do this and it will drive more impact in X, Y, and Z way. And I think here are some possibilities of how we could do it. Then you're saying, like, hey, I want your buy-in to try this thing or to get the necessary stakeholders or resources to do this thing. And then you're basically just having them like weigh in and say yes or no. And that's a lot simpler than coming to them being like, I have a problem, help me solve it. So just being really thoughtful and strategic of how you bring it up. And I think it's okay to have those this is a challenge conversations, but you need to frame it in a proactive way. Same thing with actually critical feedback from the community. I think one of the pitfalls of community, especially one of your key motions is product feedback or user feedback, is you can start to make teams internally feel overwhelmed of like, oh, the community complains all the time. It's like they're so toxic. Like all they want, like, let's get rid of the community. It's so dark. It's so toxic. I've been in so many places where that's happened, where it's just like, oh, all they do is complain, and it's like it gets negative. And so it's kind of similar of instead of being like, here's an unending feed of critical things, it's like putting together reports of here's our key opportunities. These are places where the community could really see us stepping up or changing or evolving, putting together community programming that collaborates with the community to help problem solve versus just pummeling people with negative quote after negative quote after negative quote. Also, thinking about how do you actually put together product feedback programs that are collaborative and proactive and not just reactive. One of the things I think one of my colleague who ran a lot of the feedback programs at Airbnb did really, really effectively is what we had done originally was we'd show a finished product to hosts and then they'd react. And like if the reaction was negative, it was kind of too late to do anything about it, right? It's like, well, the product's launched. Sorry, I guess maybe in a year we can adjust this on the roadmap. And so we pivoted to say like, oh, actually, let's like show them, like, let's meet with them to discuss the problem we're trying to solve before we even create the product. Let's meet with them to show them like wireframes and early versions of the product so that they're actually part of the iterative process versus just like, here, we built this thing. Do you like it? No, tough. And so that's the other thing. I think often community programs that are gathering feedback are just kind of saying like, here's how our users are reacting to the thing versus saying like, can we actually co-create or collaborate with our users, bring them along on the journey so that they're giving us feedback along the way as we build and not just reacting when it's kind of too late on the other side.
To your point, there will always be some negative feedback, but the question is how much do you receive of it? If you have like 5% of negative feedback, it's totally okay. It might or might not be some good things inside. You might or might not find something to fix out of this feedback. But if 95% of all your community members give you negative feedback, you're clearly doing something wrong. It's time to really listen to them. So and I'm curious, like we were talking a lot about this human part, about how community members can help to grow a business. Let's talk about a little bit about technology. So I'm curious if you use, and if yes, how do you use AI in your community building process?
Yes, one of the most powerful ways I've been using AI is vibe coding wireframes, especially when, because I'm in like this nascent stage of community building at Stripe, we're really building things from the ground up. So we're thinking about like, what is the online presence for the community? What will it look like when it launches? And before you had to like oh, maybe I could make something in Figma. I could like maybe make some slides. You're trying to tell the vision, but it's hard. And like it's hard to translate that into like what does a final product or design look like? Whereas now you can go into Lovable, Vercel, you name your vibe coding tool. You can have a really powerful wireframe really quickly. So you can, when you're talking to design teams, product teams, stakeholders, you're trying to get excited, going back to this whole inspiration thing, you have a wireframe you can show them or a working prototype that better communicates your vision, both from a practical standpoint of this is what needs to get done and needs to be built, and but also from an inspiration standpoint of like, look at what we're gonna have, get excited about it. This is what's gonna be. So the vibe coding wireframes and prototypes has been huge for me the last year.
You know, it sounds like when you are building community from scratch, you kind of like being a startup founder because you need to create some MVPs, you need to try things, and you cannot use all the teams because you don't know if it will work. So you need to make something very fast, very easy, test it, and afterwards you can go and then like, okay, we need to build this feature because we've tested, we've tried it. Here's how it works. So I feel like you are not just a community builder at the moment. You are also kind of a startup founder.
Totally. But that's true for all community builders. I don't think I've ever had a job where I wasn't expected to wear all the hats, but that's part of the fun of being in community. You get to wear all the hats. It's great.
Exactly. And Ashley, I have so many questions and I really wish to have the sky is the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question, what is one thing to do right away for someone who's struggling with identifying their community ROI?
I think the first thing is really digging into the needs of the business where you are working, really digging into what are the key challenges, what are the key goals, how does the company measure them? I know that sounds very, very simple, but I meet so many community managers who kind of disdain the business side of business, who don't want to look at revenue, who don't want to look at like high level business OKRs. They don't want to look at what the sales team needs to drive. They don't want to look at what pipeline the marketing team wants to drive. But it's really critical to get really into those details and really understand them, become fluent in them, and understand how to translate them to your community and your community work. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to get the resources you need. You're not going to get the leadership support you need. So it's so important to invest the time in understanding the business and the key metrics it's trying to drive and the key problems it's trying to solve, and then aligning your community work with that.
I'm always saying that if you are a community builder, you're almost like a vice CEO because you need to understand everything that's happening in your business. You need to understand everything that's happening with your clients, and you need to know how to connect those two worlds. And I feel like it's sometimes very hard, but that's the world we live in. So sorry, not sorry. And last but not least, name 2 people I should reach out to talk about community ROI.
Oh my goodness. I saw this question on your list and I was like, I have so many people. It's so hard. But I was just thinking about like people I spoke to this week. That's what I did. It's like people I've spoken to this week. So one is Holly Firestone. Just like, a legend of community. I've had the privilege to work really closely with her the past few months and have been so inspired by her experience, as well as Carrie Melissa Jones, also a legend of community who I've had the privilege to work more closely with in the past few months. So any content they produce, any opportunity you have to speak with them or see them present, they are both incredibly inspiring, but also very wise and practical and experienced in not just community ROI, but community best practices of engagement, of operations, and everything in between.
Yeah, there are so many stars. And what I really love about the community world, that all those stars that are out there in the skies, are so down to earth. You can just send them a message and they will answer you. It's like, oh my God, is it even possible? But yeah, it's a reality.
Yes.
And Ashley, thank you so much for this very, very insightful conversation, especially from your very unique experience of building this community from ground up for an established company and sharing all this nitty-gritty, all the processes that you are doing inside. And thank you so much for being so open and honest.
Of course. Well, thank you for inviting me, Yurii. This was fantastic. Thank you.
And see you in the community world. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.